Hey everybody, today we're going to be building the Armattan FPV Revision 2. The Revision 2 offers the tilt mechanism for the GoPro camera. For the sake of time, I'm not going to really identify all of these pieces, but I do want you to know that everything that we need to complete this model is included in the kit, minus any FPV gear that you may want to add later. There are a lot of pieces to this kit, but I'm going to make this very painless to assemble. Let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to install the motors onto the arms, and item number 25 on the item list that Chris provides is the bolts that we need. You can see those right here. So we're just going to start chiseling away at this, opening each part one by one so that we're not getting any of these mixed up. They have these labeled very neatly so we know where each component goes. We're going to do the same thing that we've done on all of our other builds, orienting the motors so that the wires go down the arms like this. We're going to put just a little tiny drop of Loctite on the threads of all of the screws. We have all of the motors mounted, wires pointing inward. The next thing that we're going to do is install the bobbins on this bottom frame plate. Item number 6. The reason we're going ahead and doing this now is because our frame is going to be sandwiched together like this with our arms in the middle, and it's going to be a pain to get these bobbins in there if we wait. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. And what I would do is squeeze this in half, just squeeze it and fold it in half, right like that, and then push it through. And when you let go, all you got to do is just kind of wiggle and jiggle. It'll pop right into place. So we have 6 of these bobbins that we need to put in. With our 6 bobbins installed, you can now see why when we set this other plate on here, it would be pretty hard to get to those bobbins. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use items number 7 and 8, which is going to be the stiffener that's going to go right here. So we're going to install the stiffener and the bolts and the nylock nuts. Now we have the stiffener in place. You can see that the finish on that is just amazing. Look how thick that carbon fiber is right there. You should never have to worry about this breaking, ever. The next thing that we're going to do is install the spacers and the bolts and the nylon nuts for the tail. That's going to be item number 12 and 13. The next thing that we're going to want to do is put the top clean plate on. And what we need to do is we need to get these 6 bobbins through these holes. Now, there's no real quick and easy way to do that. I've tried the ribbon method. I've tried just using a small blunt tool. Just whatever works. Just take your time, go slow. These will tear, so you want to kind of be careful. You don't want to go poking too hard, but just slowly coax those bobbins through these 6 holes. Okay, I can just about guarantee you that will be the hardest part of this entire build. I did kind of booger up one of my bobbins there getting these through. That was tough. Like I said, I tried the ribbon method, I tried the blunt tool. What seemed to work best for me was just being really careful with this spring hook. But anyway, so those are in. And for gosh sakes, I hope you have your A for Armattan oriented correctly, because you do not want to take that off and do that again. Moving on. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this bottom plate. We're going to use item number 14. 4 12mm nylon bolts and nylon nuts. Where's number 14? I'm losing stuff here. Number 14. Right here. We're going to use the nylon bolts. Place these through these angled slots right here. Here, 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 and here. And we're going to mount our bolts there for our distribution board. Okay, we have the nylon hardware coming up through the bottom plate. We have one nut on there. These are going to be extended all the way out. Don't want to tighten them up too much because, again, it is nylon. There again, making sure that we have the A oriented correctly. We want to be nice and neat. Just going to take the distribution board, place it over top of the hardware. Then we're going to put one nylon nut on each of the corners. Now the reason I'm kind of doing this, what may seem like it's kind of out of order, I'm doing it the best way that we can do to keep from having components in our way when we're trying to do the build. So we're going to go ahead, like I said, put the nuts on here. We're going to actually tin some of these pads and just prep that for our ESC installation. Then we're going to go ahead and bolt on the arms and go from there. We're going to be soldering the ESCs to these 4 pins in the rear and these 4 pins in the front. Remembering to keep all of our connections that we need to make for, if your FPV gear or anything that you need around the perimeter of the board, so we can keep the center open for our flight control. I'm just going to tin these up and get these ready. We're going to do the same thing that we've done on all the other builds. We're going to remove the heat shrink from the ESC. Pop off the heat sink. Remove these 3 wires. We're going to solder our motor wires directly to the ESC. We're going to do this to all 4 ESCs. We're going to remove the heat shrink, take off the motor wires, and before we actually install the arms, we're going to solder our ESCs. Put that around there, Brian. We're going to solder our ESCs to the power distribution port. I decided to come back and talk about this a little bit more. That way, if anybody runs into any issues or anything when they're doing the desoldering of these wires, the solder that comes on these from the factory takes a lot of heat to get these wires off. And just like paint dissolves paint, solder helps unsolder solder. So it might help to just take a little bit of solder, put it on the tip of your iron, and then touch it to the pad there that you're trying to desolder. It'll help heat it up there a little bit quicker. Then just put a little bit of tension on the wire as you're heating it up, and it should pop right off. What I've been doing on all of my builds is I actually take all of this solder that's on this pad off, and I use the solder that Chris provides in the kit. And I'll show you that too. So now what I'm doing is just taking a solder sucker that You can get these at Radio Shack or anywhere. And heat the solder up and then take it right off. There we go. That's how you can do it. In a lot of the previous builds, we've been cutting these positive and negative wires to length, mainly just to keep things neat. But on this FPV model, the arms actually retract. You can fold the arms in rather. So to keep from running into any issues, kinking the wire or being too short or whatever, I'm just going to solder these on there the full length. Alright, I went ahead and used the white wire. It's a positive wire, but you and I know that it's a positive wire, so the color really doesn't matter. But I soldered the white wire right here. I've also went ahead and soldered in my two main battery wires right here. I've used the XT60 connectors. I use the XT60 connectors, so I'm not going to be using the T connector. Just need to slide the heat shrink tube up on there. Solder on my XT60 connector, and at this point we can actually mount our flight control board using the double-sided tape. You just want to get it, centered up as best you can, leaving access to these other pads so that you can add things later. It doesn't have to be scientific. It will go with the buttons facing the rear. This is the front of the quad. Okay, I have my tangled mess of wires all soldered up. With any luck, you do too. I have stuck the flight control to the power distribution board with the utmost precision. Lined that thing up nice and neat, fits perfectly on there. Actually, I still have 2 extra pads right here if I want to use them for something else. So I ran a positive and negative for a video transmitter, and I still have the 2 extra pads left over. So I know you're wondering, when are we actually going to get back to the quad, putting on some arms? Well, that's what we're going to do next. Alright, I got all kinds of bugs and mosquitoes in the garage, so if I get to hooping and hollering, it could either be that I'm just super stoked about this FPV build, or a mosquito got me, one or the other. We'll have fun with it either way. What we're going to do next, we need to put in the bolts for our arms, and that's going to be item number 10. Item number 10, 12mm metal bolts and 4 nylock nuts. And those are going to go to the inside of the arm right here. The arms have oval-shaped openings, and then there's the notch in the end. And the reason that they're designed like that is so that we can fold the quad. So what you would do would be to take your thumb screw out here, slide it back about 1/4 of an inch, and then it'll fold back nice and neat like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to put the 12mm bolt in here and just kind of snug it up. We're not going to tighten it down. We're just going to kind of snug it up. Now what we're going to do is just going to take the arms, slide them in between here, lock it onto that bolt that we just installed. We're going to take item number 11, which is our thumb screws. We're just going to stick these in here, just finger tight for now. Starting to look good. Alright, that's a tight squeeze. Now that we got the top part of the frame assembled, we're going to go ahead and use item number 16, which is going to be our aluminum standoffs. 16 is kind of split between two packages. We have our aluminum standoffs and then the screws that go with them. And we're going to put those all around the perimeter of this lower plate here. The motor layout for our KK Mini with the quad face and me, this is motor 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're going to go ahead and hook these ESCs up. Motor 1 is going to connect right here on top. Ground being out, signal wire facing towards the LCD. Motor 2. Motor 3. And motor 4. Now we'll definitely come back and tuck these wires and neaten them up and all that good stuff. Just want to kind of keep some of them from flopping around while we get those ESCs hooked up. So now we can just take this, just set it right on top of here, right like that. Everything should line up. And we're going to put our screws I'm not tightening anything down right now. The design of this frame, in my opinion, is just ingenious. I'm going to leave these out here on the end. I'm going to leave these pretty loose, because what we want to do there, these are our plates that we're going to use for our GoPro. Out of all these plates that we have for our GoPro and the whole mounting on the front, this is going to be the one that we're going to put right here. I want to make sure that the oval holes are on the right hand side, your left, because what's going to go right there It's going to be the side. Before we tighten everything up that we just did here, we need to install this front plate here. Now, I'm not going to do that on camera, but I'm going to show you how it goes. There's an assortment of holes on here. So we've got, come on. We've got this one here that almost looks like a figure 8. Got an inner hole and an outer hole. And then over here, we've got this inner hole and then, well, I'm calling it an inner hole and an outer hole. But we just got all kinds of holes here. And these are just for various things that you could do, because you could mount a gimbal right here on the front. That's what the large hole is for the motor on your gimbal. But what we're going to do is you're just going to take the little sink nuts and you just push those into the rubber pieces. Going to go right on there, right like that. So what I've done is I've mounted 2 pieces here and here. I've used the inside hole. You can see where the hole there from the outside, but I've used the inside hole. And the reason you want to do that, you want the rubber piece to squeeze onto that carbon fiber tube. If you mounted it on the outside hole, then it's really loose. You want it to squeeze the tube. So anyway, so I've mounted those on the inside hole. Now, when we get to the other side, the other plate, and we got to make sure that we orient this the correct way. But when we get over here, we're not going to be using these anymore. We're actually going to be using these holes right here. Right there and right there. So with all of that said, what you're going to end up with on the back, these are the holes that I'm using. I say back because this is the part that's going to connect to the, it actually sits like this, but this is the part that's going to connect to the quad. There's the rubber bushings, carbon fiber tube, and then on the inside, these are the holes that I'm using. So on the back, I'm using these, and on the inside, I'm using these that look like the figure 8, but I'm using the inside hole. But this thing it's pretty stiff. So whatever angle you put your camera at, it's gonna stay that way. Then these tabs, come on now, right here and here, that's what's gonna, frame is just gonna sandwich those and hold that in place. So we're gonna put that in now. We're getting ready to make our connections from our motors to our ESCs, but before we do that, we're going to go ahead, as I've learned from past experience, it can be kind of hard to get to this hole right here. We're going to go ahead and install the standoffs for our legs. Then we're going to mount our ESCs. I'm going to cut the bullet connectors off. I'm just going to snip right behind the connector. Don't want to cut too far down the wire because further down you go, the wire is enameled. So I'm just cutting right behind the connector, and I'm going to do this for all the motors. ESCs are going to be mounted under the arms. All you have to do is just grab about 1/8 of an inch of this silicone. Just take a tiny little bit off. I'm going to slide the heat shrink over top of the ESCs. I'm going to go all the way over. So we need to solder the connections up. This motor is going to be spinning clockwise, counterclockwise, clockwise, counterclockwise. So we're going to cross 2 of these wires. Instead of coming straight out of the motor like this, we're going to cross any 2 of the wires and solder them to the ESCs. We're going to do the same thing for this motor. So these 2, we're going to have 2 of the wires crossed. These 2, when we solder them to the ESC, they're going to be coming straight out of the motor, straight to the ESC. Alright, so when you get done, the silicone should just kind of spring back, covering up your wires nice and neat. Don't forget to replace your heat sinks. Not like I've you know, ever done that or anything. Put those back on there. Slide our heat shrink covering, shrink it up, and we're ready to zip it on the arm. I always put the stickers on there. I'm quite proud of my Armattan quads, so I want to show them off. Now, one thing that I did do here, I don't know if you noticed, and you don't have to do it, but I pulled all the wires to the rear of the arms, because usually when you crash, let's face it, you're going forward, and if you're going to hit something, I wanted to keep the front of the arm open. We're getting somewhere, folks. We have the ESC soldered up. We've got them mounted. Now all we have to do is the finishing touches. Where you put your buzzer is entirely up to you. I stuck it between these two plates, and I may end up moving it, but I stuck it between these two plates and plugged it in. The buzzer is going to give you arming notification and low voltage warning. All we have to do is what I have laid out on the table here. We have the bits and pieces for our GoPro. We have to put on our prop adapters, and then this is a cover that will mount right here to cover up our flight control, so we can pop it off if we need to make any adjustments or anything like that. The flight controller, as you put it in, is going to have all the settings that you need. You don't need to go in there and change anything. It's going to be pre-programmed from Chris the way he sends it to you for this model. I'm going to be using a SJ4000, so I'm going to go ahead and use the smaller standoffs right here. He gives you the larger ones if you have the older style GoPro, which I also have, and I may try that as well, but I'm going to be using these small standoffs for my GoPro, my SJ. We have these little rubber bumpers that we're going to put on here, and that's what's going to kind of squeeze the camera to hold it in place. So that's what we're going to do next. where you put your rubber bumpers is really up to you. Just need to put it somewhere that it's not going to interfere with anything. Well, I can tell you this much, you don't have to worry about that camera going anywhere. Because, I mean, that sucker has got a grip. It has got a grip on that camera. I'll give you a close-up of what that tilt mechanism looks like. Just need to install our prop adapters. Using the small screws. Put a little bit of Loctite on those before you tighten them down. Okay folks, that is how you build the Armattan FPV Revision 2. There are all of these different cutouts. Some are just to save weight, some are for appearance, and some are for reason. All of these holes that are in the frame, right here, right here, right here, these are for a standard, got one over here. If you wanted to run an FPV antenna, this is just an extension cable that I have. These fit in these holes perfectly, right like that. So you can mount your antenna in any of these locations. The other neat thing that he has now, he also has a integrated power distribution board. So you could take this bottom plate off and just replace this with the new integrated style, and that eliminates the need for this that eliminates the need for this power distribution board, because it's then integrated into this bottom plate. Real quick, I forgot to mention, you do get an added accessory here for a FPV camera. If you don't want to use the tilt mechanism, if you don't want to use the GoPro as your FPV camera, you can actually mount this little bracket right here and add on a separate FPV camera. I'm going to be using the SJ. You can see here with the SJ cam, it right here for your what would be for the display for the GoPro happens to be perfect for the power button for the SJ cam. So this is a perfect fit. I'm quite pleased with that. So I am going to do a flight video and show you how this bad boy flies.